Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon in English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in Volume 5, which is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enter. Today we're going to be studying chapters 41 through 53. We're going to actually finish up this book today, and then next week we're going to be moving into Volume 6, which is titled The Natural Law of Dhamma. So the way that we do this class is I invite people in Zoom to be able to read a chapter from the book, and then after someone reads it, I will share some teachings on that, and then I open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Normally we study just 10 chapters, but because we're finishing up this book and there was just an extra kind of 3 or 4 chapters, we've included those into today's class. So we're going to spend a certain amount of time on each chapter and just kind of move along, opening up to questions that you guys might have along the way. So if you would like to ask questions and you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask those questions by putting them into the comment section. I'll be able to see those and then answer your question. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So if there's anyone that's in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter, you're more than welcome by just electronically raising your hand. Okay, looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
Death at the door of deathless. Is it possible, Sunakata, that some monk here might think thus? Craving has been called an arrow by the ascetic. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance is spread about by desire, craving, and anger. That arrow of craving has been removed from me. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance has been expelled. I am one who is completely intent on nibbana. Because he falsely thinks of himself thus, he might pursue those things that are unsuitable for one completely intent on nibbana. He might pursue the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye. He might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. When he pursues the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye, he might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. Craving invades his mind. With his mind invaded by craving, he would incur death or deadly pain. Suppose, Sunakata, a man were wounded by an arrow thickly smeared with poison, and his friends and companions, his kinsmen and relatives, brought a surgeon. The surgeon would cut around the opening of the wound with a knife. Then he would probe for the arrow with a probe. Then he would pull out the arrow and would expel the poisonous substance, leaving a trace of it behind. Knowing that a trace was left behind, he would say, "Good man, the arrow has been pulled out from you. The poisonous substance has been expelled with a trace left behind, but it is incapable of harming you. Eat only suitable food. Do not eat unsuitable food, or else the wound may accumulate pus and blood. From time to time, wash the wound, and from time to time, anoint its opening, so that pus and blood do not cover the opening of the wound. Do not walk around in the wind and sun, or else dust and dirt may infect the opening of the wound. Take care of your wound, good man, and see to it that the wound heals." The man would think, "The arrow has been expelled from me. The poisonous substance has been expelled with no trace left behind, and it is incapable of harming me." He would eat unsuitable food, and the wound would accumulate pus and blood. He would not wash the wound from time to time, nor would he anoint its opening from time to time, and pus and blood would cover the opening of the wound. He would walk around in the wind and sun, and dust and dirt would infect the opening of the wound. He would not take care of his wound, nor would he see to it that the wound heals. Then, both because he does what is unsuitable and because the foul poisonous substance had been expelled with a trace left behind, the wound would swell. With it swelling, he would incur death or deadly pain. So too, Sunakuda, it is possible that some monk here might think thus. Craving has been called an error by the ascetic. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance is spread about by desire, craving, and anger. That arrow of craving has been removed from me. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance has been expelled. I am completely intent upon nibbana. Because he falsely thinks of himself thus, he might pursue those things that are unsuitable for one completely intent on nibbana. He might pursue the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye. He might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. When he pursues the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye, he might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. Craving invades his mind. With his mind invaded by craving, he would incur death or deadly pain. For it is death in the discipline of the noble one, Sunakata, when one abandons the training and reverts to the low life. And it is deadly pain when one carries out some defiled conduct.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So what we've got here is a discourse where the Buddha is essentially cautioning you to not consider yourself to be enlightened, meaning having eliminated these poisons from the mind. This is something that I've taught as well all throughout as I've been teaching you guys. I have taught at different times to never convince yourself that you're enlightened. Even when it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you're not experiencing any discontentedness, it's better to just continue to practice the teachings and cultivate wisdom about any other things that you might decide you'd like to cultivate wisdom about. Because what he's giving here is a story of an individual who thinks that their craving and ignorance has been eliminated from the mind, but it actually hasn't. It's still there. And now they've actually started doing things that continues to allow their defilements of the mind, the pollutions, to continue to exist in the mind. He's using this analogy of this wound and having taken out the poison, and then the person thinks that everything's fine and they don't actually attend to the wound. So the same thing is true, that if you actually convince yourself that you're enlightened, but the mind's not actually enlightened, you might actually start doing things that are unwise. So for example, there's certain cravings, desires, attachments that you know that you need to eliminate, and you'll never ever go back to them. Like drugs and alcohol is one of those things. If we've used those in the past, we know that it's unwise to do that, and it's going to hinder the mind from being able to experience mindfulness and concentration, and we're going to make unwise decisions when we're using those substances. So we know, like, okay, leave those alone and never go back to them, and you can cultivate the wisdom to do that. But there's certain cravings, desires, attachments that as a craving, desire, attachment, it's harmful. But once you get rid of the craving, desire, attachment, there's no harm in you continuing to do this particular thing. Like, for example, you guys have heard me use the chocolate cake a lot, where you might actually be attached to a piece of chocolate cake, where you show up to a restaurant, you have this amazing piece of chocolate cake, you get attached to it, you just can't wait to go back next week and get a piece of chocolate cake. And when you go back, wow, you're so excited and you're so happy that they have it. But now 2 or 3 weeks later, you go back and they don't have your chocolate cake, and now you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And here you would be able to see that your mind is attached or craving the chocolate cake. And what you would be wise to do is distance yourself from that. Go 3 months, 6 months or so without eating that chocolate cake, and now train your mind to let it go. But then at some point, when you're convinced that craving, desire, attachment has been eliminated from the mind, you might decide to start eating this chocolate cake again, because there's no harm in a piece of chocolate cake, especially if it's a vegan piece of chocolate cake. There's no harm that's being caused there. But if you've convinced yourself that a craving is gone or that the mind is enlightened, and you're not 100% sure, you might actually invite this piece of chocolate cake back into your life without realizing that the craving is still there. You might think like, oh, the craving's all gone. I can, bring this chocolate cake back into my life. Well, you need to be attentive to the mind and not convince yourself of that until you've seen evidence that that's the case. Because when we talk about these qualities of enlightenment, like eliminating discontentedness and the focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory, the personal professional relationships that are blossoming, not even being in a bad mood anymore. Occasionally you guys have heard me maybe say that an enlightened being doesn't have exhaustion, that they don't experience tiredness. They get sleepy where they need to sleep, but they don't get exhausted, right? And the reason why is because with craving, desire, attachment, the mind is pulling you in all these different directions. But when that's all gone, the mind's not being pulled in all these different directions, so you can just reside at ease and peaceful. But as long as you've got craving in your mind will be pulling in all these different directions and you'll get exhausted and tired. So these qualities that we talk about with enlightenment, they're actually produced by purifying the mind and eliminating a craving. So that concentration and that deep memory and that focus, that's actually occurring because you're eliminating the craving, desire, attachment. It's the meditation that's helping you to get to the point where you can eliminate craving, desire, attachment. But it's when the craving, desire, attachment is actually leaving the mind and has been eliminated that it's no longer pulling in all these opposite directions, so the mind can be more focused and more calm and more concentrated. So the danger is that if you invite this chocolate cake back into your life with the craving still being there, now you haven't fully extinguished the craving. The mind is not going to experience the qualities of the focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory, and all these other beneficial qualities associated with enlightenment. So the Buddha is essentially giving this analogy in the story so that you don't ever convince yourself that you're actually enlightened. Instead, if you're going to bring this chocolate cake back into your life, observe the mind. Eat it a few times and see, is there any conditioned pleasant feelings there? And then eventually you're going to show up to this restaurant one day and they're not going to have your piece of chocolate cake. Or maybe you're fully intent on eating that chocolate cake and at the last moment you just tell yourself, no, I'm not going to eat that chocolate cake. And you observe the mind when that chocolate cake isn't there. Is it agitated? Is it annoyed? Is it frustrated? Is it just feeling a little bit icky and a little bit off today? You can notice that about the mind, and then you'll know whether or not the craving, desire, attachment is still there. So you're going to need to still attend to the mind. When the mind gets to enlightenment, you might have been going 3-6 months without experiencing any discontentedness, but then you might have some discontentedness. But eventually, when all your cravings are gone, let's just say this person's enlightened, and they've already been experiencing multiple months and years of 2 or 3 months with complete peace, and then they get a little bit of ickiness, or 6 months of complete peace and joy, and then they get a little bit of ickiness. As this is occurring, eventually you'll eliminate all your cravings, and it'll be 2 months, 3 months, and you're not quite sure whether or not you're enlightened or not, because you maybe have gone as long as 3 or 6 months without any discontentedness before. So you don't know whether your mind's enlightened or not, because now you're going 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, no discontentedness, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, maybe 14, 16, 18 months, no discontentedness. At this point, you pretty much know your mind is enlightened, but it's better to never convince yourself of that you just continue to stay dedicated and diligent, because in those early time frame of the mind actually being enlightened, in those 16, 18 month time frame, your mind is newly enlightened, and you would like to be able to be attentive to the mind. Don't ever convince yourself that it's actually enlightened. Instead, just be attentive to the mind. Continue to hone the mind. An individual who got to enlightenment 20 years ago is actually going to be more enlightened than someone who just got to enlightenment last year, for example. Because even though these beings are actually experiencing the same peace and the same qualities, the same joy, those kinds of things, the wisdom that this individual has cultivated after being enlightened for 20 years is going to be very different than this person who is at 1 year. They're going to have a higher level of wisdom from one person to the other in terms of the way that they've cultivated the mind and the level of concentration and clarity. They're both experiencing no discontentedness. They're both experiencing peace and joy. But this person who's been enlightened for 20 years, their actually mind is going to be much more cultivated than even this person who just got to enlightenment recently. So if you convince yourself that you're enlightened and you don't stay attentive to the mind, you won't continue to experience that improvement. So while we have these 4 stages of enlightenment and we consider Arahant the 4th stage of enlightenment where the mind is actually enlightened, there's more room to grow from there and beyond. Your mind can continue to grow. But if you convince yourself that your mind's enlightened, you'll probably become complacent. You'll probably have ego that comes in and conceit. And if that's the case, your mind's actually not enlightened. If you become complacent and ego and things like this are coming in. So the Buddha is giving you that heads up that says, hey, don't ever convince yourself you're enlightened. And he's giving you this story, this analogy of the arrow to show you how this happens with that. And it could very easily happen with something like this, but you're not interested in that. So just stay attentive to the wound, right? Continue to dress it, continue to protect it, continue to ensure that it's getting the medicines that it needs, and following the advice of like this doctor here. The same thing is true, that you continue to follow the guidance and the wisdom and the training methods that you've been doing all along. Even when your mind is, not experiencing discontentedness for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, you'll get to a point where you probably know that, yeah, your mind's enlightened, but just don't convince yourself of that, and just continue to stay dedicated to developing the mind and developing your practice. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 41, Death at the Door of the Deathless. Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David, I just had a question about deathless. I think you explained it last time, but can you please explain why it's called deathless enlightenment?
Sure. Yeah, this is because that by the time somebody gets to enlightenment, they're not going to experience death the way that the Buddha describes it. What they're experiencing is final enlightenment, because at the time that an enlightened being dies, what they're experiencing is the final separation of the body and the mind, because that can't be eliminated as long as you're alive. So you're still going to be experiencing some muted physical pain. It's not going to be the same as it was when you were unenlightened, but you're still going to be experiencing some muted physical pain. Like if you stood too close to a fire, you need that little bit of pain just to know, like, oh, I'm standing too close to the fire, let me move. And then you moved. Where if you didn't have that, it would destroy the body when you're standing there without that physical pain. So when we get to enlightenment and die, we call it final enlightenment or final nibbana, because that's when the mind and the body are separating. The being isn't dying, because if there's death, then there's going to be continuous discontentedness, right? So if you look at the dependent origination, where it goes from ignorance all the way through all those factors, then you get aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So since you've dismantled dependent origination, you're no longer going to experience death, because you've dismantled dependent origination. It's destroyed. So you can't experience death again, and you can't experience discontentedness again. So now that you guys understand dependent origination, since we've studied that, you can understand a deeper understanding of why an enlightened being doesn't experience death, because they've dismantled dependent origination.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 42. If there's someone who would like to read this one, you guys are welcome to.
I can read it.
Okay, go ahead, Vibhav.
10 abodes of the noble ones, the mind is liberated by wisdom. Monks, there are these 10 abodes of the noble ones in which the noble ones reside in the past, present, or future. What 10? Here, a monk has abandoned 5 factors, possesses 6 factors, has a single guard and 4 supports, has eliminated personal beliefs, totally renounced seeking, purified his intentions, calmed bodily activity, and become well liberated in mind and well liberated by wisdom. And how has a monk abandoned 5 factors? Here, a monk has abandoned sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt. It is in this way that a monk has abandoned 5 factors. And how does a monk possess 6 factors? Here, having seen a form with the eye, a monk is neither happy nor saddened, but resides equanimous, mindful, and clearly comprehending. having heard the sound with the ear, having smelled an odor with the nose, having tasted a flavor with the tongue, having touched a physical object with the body, having recognized a mental object with the mind, a monk is neither happy nor saddened, but resides equanimous, mindful, and clearly comprehending. It is in this way that a monk possesses 6 factors. And how does a monk have a single God? Here, a monk possesses a mind guarded by mindfulness. It is in this way that a monk has a single God. And how does a monk have 4 supports? Here, having reflected, a monk uses some things, patiently endures other things, avoids still other things, and dispels still other things. It is in this way that a monk has 4 supports. And how has a monk eliminated personal beliefs? Here, whatever ordinary personal beliefs may be held by ordinary ascetics and Brahmin, that is, the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, the world is finite or the world is infinite, the soul and the body are the same, or the soul is one thing and the body another, the Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. A monk has discarded and dispelled them all, given them up, rejected them, let go of them, abandoned and relinquished them. It is in this way that a monk has eliminated personal beliefs. And how has a monk totally renounced seeking? Here, a monk has abandoned the search for sensual pleasure, and the search for existence has eliminated the search for a spiritual life. Here, a monk has abandoned the search for sensual pleasures and the search for existence and has eliminated the search for a spiritual life. It is in this way that a monk has totally renounced seeking. And how has a monk purified his intentions? Here, a monk has abandoned sensual intention, intention of ill will, and intention of harming. It is in this way that a monk has purified his intentions. And how has a monk calmed bodily activity? Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous fading away of former gladness and sadness, a monk presence in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. It is in this way that a monk has calmed bodily activity. And how is a monk well liberated in mind? Here, a monk's mind is liberated from craving, anger, and ignorance, unknowing of true reality. It is in this way that a monk is well liberated in mind. And how is a monk well liberated by wisdom? Here, a monk understands, I have abandoned craving, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. I have abandoned anger, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. Abandoned ignorance and knowing of true reality, cut it off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. It is in this way that a monk is well liberated by wisdom. Monks, whatever noble ones in the past reside in noble abodes, all reside in the same 10 noble abodes. Whatever noble ones in the future will reside in noble abodes, all will reside in these same 10 noble abodes. Whatever noble ones at present reside in noble abodes, all reside in these same 10 noble abodes. These are the 10 abodes of the noble ones, in which the noble ones reside in the past, present, or future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So these are very clear and very detailed. I think all the teachings of the Buddha are very clear when you understand all of his totality of his teachings. But I think these are particularly clear here. They don't really depend on many other things that you guys haven't learned at this point. So what I'm going to do is just open up to any questions that you guys have, because here what he's essentially doing is saying these are the 10 things that you would need to cultivate in order to be able to get to enlightenment. These aren't the only 10 things, but the mind would need to reside here. So this first one, you guys might be recognizing that these are the 5 hindrances. He's saying someone who's gotten to enlightenment has eliminated the 5 hindrances. The second one, he's saying that people that are enlightened are neither happy nor saddened by contact through the 6 sense bases, that they're all practicing this mindfulness or this guard of the mind, that they have these 4 supports, that they have eliminated personal beliefs. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have any beliefs. You know the truth 100% of how the world functions. He's talking about renouncing seeking, talking about certain intentions. This is right intention from the Eightfold Path. Then he talks about calming the mind and entering into the fourth jhana. All enlightened beings will have experienced all four jhanas. And then he talks about liberation of the mind, where the mind no longer has craving, anger, and ignorance, and that it's been liberated by wisdom. So these are the 10 things that one would be practicing, among other things. But these are like where the mind's residing. And they're real anchor points that you can look to for what you need to cultivate in order to be able to get to enlightenment, among other things. So I see you guys have some questions, and those of you guys in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you guys can ask questions by putting it into the comment section, or you guys can raise your hands in Zoom. So it looks like Marcy, you're first. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, Teacher David, the number 4, it says, I think that's about the supports, right? How does a monk have 4 supports? Here, having reflected, a monk uses some things, patiently endures other things, avoids still other things, and dispels still other things. In this way, the monk has 4 supports. Is there a way that you could maybe expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, this is essentially knowing what's wise and unwise, that you're going to use certain things, right? You're going to use certain material objects and things like this. Then there's going to be certain situations where you're going to need to patiently endure things. Like maybe you're on a boat traveling, 3 hours from one location to the other, and there's this rumbling engine, right? And you're going to be sitting there and just patiently endure that, you're going to hear this rumbling engine. It's impermanent. You're not going to be upset or frustrated about it, but you can patiently endure that thing. And then you avoid still other things. Like there's certain things that you know are unwise and you avoid, right? You're going to avoid that street corner where they sell heroin and crystal methamphetamine. You're going to avoid that brothel down the street, to avoid these things. Or you're going to avoid going out at 2 a.m. in the morning and walking past all the bars where people are spilling out into the street and being rowdy and so forth. You're going to avoid these things because you know that it's wise to do so. And then still you dispel other things, meaning that you know that these things are untrue and you're not going to feed into those things, that you dispel these things. So these are 4 things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and you have these supports where you use certain things and like, hey, I can use this and I'm not harming anybody, and this is something that's not going to lead to any kind of unwholesome results. And then there's the patiently enduring things, avoiding certain things, and then dispelling certain things. Like maybe somebody says something to you and you know that it's untrue, and you just kind of set it to the side and you kind of dispel that out of the mind. You don't grab onto it because you know that it's untrue.
Okay, thank you, Teacher David. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Samantha must have had the same questions. Her hand went down. So let me see if we have any questions online. And I don't see anything there. So let's go. Oh, there's Yihang. She has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I also appreciate your answers to the number 4. And then I also have a little question about eliminating the personal beliefs. And sometimes I feel like the mind sometimes always, I think you also said that there was a craving, but it's like sometimes still craves the purpose of the life, or like the purpose of the whole existence of everything. And sometimes it craves like, how does this whole world or everything originate at the very beginning? Like why would all these have all the tents, the pollutions? Why do they exist there at the beginning? Should we like just dedicate it on just cut off when those curiosity arises? Or
you can. The Buddha does give an origination story or a creation story. It's in volume 11. It's been somewhere around chapter 58, I think, somewhere around the 50s or 60s. Volume 11, he talks about this creation story and explaining how the world was created. He says that in terms of finding the origins of the beginning of the cycle of rebirth, in terms of like a time frame, he says, that's undiscoverable. But in terms of how the world actually came about, he does give a creation story during his lifetime. So that could help to satisfy your craving by just seeing what he actually said, because you can either cut off and let go, or you can fulfill it. So that might be a way for you to fulfill understanding how the world was created, is by understanding his creation story.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Vibhav, you have a question?
Yes, can you explain the number 6? They're saying the search for existence and has eliminated the search for spiritual life. So why does it say like one has eliminated the search for a spiritual life?
Because by this time you've already found it. You don't have a search for it any longer. Even in the first stage of enlightenment, you've already eliminated your search for a spiritual life, because by the time you got there, you've eliminated your doubt, and you know that these teachings are leading to an improved state of mind and life. So you will have eliminated your search for a spiritual life by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, because you've already found it. And this is talking about an enlightened being. Yeah, they've already got it, so they don't need to continue to look for it.
Okay, and on number 8, is there a reason to specifically mention the 4th jhana, or not like stream entry, or not like third 1 to 4? Or...
Yeah, I think here he's just referring to the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and how the previous fading away of the former gladness and sadness has occurred. So he's talking about those particular qualities, as well as being beyond this pleasure and pain, and the equanimity and mindfulness being fully developed in the mind. That's what he means by purified by equanimity and mindfulness, that the mind has fully developed these qualities. So by the time you got to the 4th jhana, these things have happened. And if you've gotten to the 4th jhana, that means you've already experienced 1, 2, and 3. So we can say that all those qualities of the jhanas have already been acquired in this individual who is enlightened. And this is another place where you can see where some people say that the jhanas are only experienced during meditation, and you turn these jhanas on and off, where here you can see him talking about the mind residing in these abodes. That's what an abode is, that it's a dwelling, that the mind dwells or resides in this particular mental qualities that he's talking about. And here, this is referring to the 4th jhana, because if someone's gotten to the 4th jhana, you can know that they've already gotten to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd one. And he's talking about the qualities that are experienced in the 4th jhana.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like we have something coming in here. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was remembering that in the 50s. Yep, that's for Yihan. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so let's see if we have anything here. All right, I don't see any other questions, so we can go to the next chapter, which is chapter 43. Is there someone who would like to read this?
I can read, Teacher David, if no one else would like to.
Sure, go for it.
One who abandons the taints that should be abandoned by a seeing. Monks, a well-taught, noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled in disciplined in their teachings, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their teachings, understands what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, he does not attend to those things unfit for attention, and he attends to those things fit for attention. What are these things unfit for attention that he does not attend to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire arises in him, and the arising taint of sensual desire increases. The unarisen taint of existence arises in him, and the arising taint of existence increases. The unarisen taint of ignorance arises in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what things fit for attention that he attends to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of sensual desire is abandoned. The unarisen taint of existence does not arise in him, and the unarisen taint of existence is abandoned. The unarisen taint of ignorance does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance is abandoned. These are the things fit for attention that he attends to. by not attending to things unfit for attention, and by attending to things for fit for attention. Unarisen taints do not arise in him, and arisen taints are abandoned. He attends wisely. This is discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is cause of discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is the elimination of discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. When he attends in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in him: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So what the Buddha is talking about here is that if you're attentive to the mind, that whenever you see that something is a rising sensual desire in the mind, or it increases sensual desire, that you wouldn't do those things any longer. Let's just say that you were getting professional massages, and now when you're doing this and you have somebody that's touching you, you notice that there's the sensual desire that increases in your mind, and you're like, whoa, 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 you're not interested in doing that anymore, because this is going to allow the sensual desire to come up in the mind, and now you might act upon that in unwise ways, maybe like having sexual contact or masturbation or something like that. So if there's anything you're doing, whether it's eating a piece of chocolate cake or indulging in any particular thing that could be a sensual desire, the Buddha is saying if you're noticing that it's arising your sensual desire, or it's increasing the amount of sensual desire in your mind, then you would eliminate that and you wouldn't do those things anymore. And the same thing is true about this fetter of personal existence view and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. If you're doing any kind of activities where you're noticing that it's increasing these things or arising it in the mind, the Buddha is saying, stop doing that you wouldn't attend to that, you would avoid doing that particular thing. And then in terms of things that you would actually do, is anything that's helping you to eliminate sensual desire, personal existence view, or ignorance in the mind, then he's saying that you would pay attention to these kinds of things. And one of the things to pay attention to is the Four Noble Truths. That's what he's talking about here when he's saying that this individual pays close attention to the Four Noble Truths, that he attends wisely to this. And then having done so, the individual will ultimately work towards eliminating the first 3 fetters, which is going to take the mind into the first stage of enlightenment: personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. Of course, there's other things you need to do besides just what he's talking about here, but this is like having mindfulness, being aware of the mind, and then when you're noticing that your fetters are increasing, cut that off and let it go, avoid that activity. But some of these activities you might actually choose to go back to. Like somebody could get a professional massage and not have sensual desire arise. So you're going to need to distance yourself from that for a period of time in order to train your mind to let it go. And then once the mind has eliminated that particular craving, you might decide to do that in order to help the body, because there's certain health benefits associated with this kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with getting a professional massage, for example. And there's other things like this as well. I just use that as an example. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Let's see, it looks like Janae has a question. How is it possible for the fetter of ignorance to arise? To me, it just seems like it is persisting rather than arising or fading. So ignorance might be, say that you know that it's unwise to walk down the street and, shout and yell, right? You know this intellectually, that it's unwise to do that. But now say you go out with your friends and your friends are starting to shout and yell, and you're feeling this urge to shout and yell, and now your ignorance is arising where you're like kind of feeding into this potentially. And the Buddha is saying, hey, it would be unwise to actually do that. So this is just a simple example, but you could come up with other examples like this, where intellectually you might know that something is unwise, but your mind is still potentially doing it. And now your ignorance is arising in that situation where it's getting ready to make the decision to now go do this thing. And we could relate this to drugs and alcohol use or any number of other kinds of things. Whenever you're making unwise decisions, there's a certain amount of ignorance there. So if you find yourself in situations where you're starting to have this urge to make unwise decisions, that's your ignorance arising. Okay, looks like Marcy either has a question or would like to read.
Yes, I do have a question, Teacher David, and I will read next if there's no one else that's interested. So the other day, I had forgotten my lunch going into my client's house. And at my client's house, there wasn't really much for me to eat for lunch that would sustain the body. And the body was feeling like a little bit shaky, so I could tell that, it was hungry. It needed. So I had, she had leftover pork chops and some cheese. So I decided that I would have a couple pieces of cheese. Now I understand by, eating this cheese, I wasn't, giving the body some nourishment, just enough to kind of stop the shaking so I could get home to eat something that was more beneficial. But I also know that cheese does cause harm in the world. I still ended up eating the cheese because it was basically all I had for an option at that point in time. Ignorance. Was that arisen in the mind, or was I just aware that this was and still made a choice and still caused harm? Like I'm trying to find that balance in that or understanding.
It doesn't sound like there was any ignorance there. It sounds like you made a wise choice, because at the end of the day, you need to show loving kindness and compassion to all beings. And one of those beings is this being who you are. So to allow those shakes to continue and maybe go down the street and get in an accident in your car or other kind of health detriments or problems, that's not wise. So you will find that even though you aspire to be vegan and not eat animal products, you're going to find that you're going to be in situations nowadays where you don't really have any other options but to just go ahead and eat something that is going to cause the least amount of harm as possible. I've started actually calling this a vegetarian. A vegetarian is that you're as vegan as possible in any given situation, realizing that in some cases you might need to eat an egg here or there. You might need to eat some cheese or some other things like this. So if you've decided that you're going to go vegan and that's what you're doing, you can't cling to eating veganism too and being vegan. So a vegetarian would be somebody who is eating as vegan as possible in every single situation, but always realizing that there might be a situation where you can't do that. So I experienced one of those too. When I went to the USA 2 years ago with my family, we were at this place where it was like a 20-minute drive by taxi to get to food that would have been vegan. And it was very expensive for the taxi ride and for the food itself and getting back to where we were. So this hotel that we were at for 3 or 4 days, they were serving eggs and yogurt and different things like this. And I needed to eat some of that stuff. But I knew in my mind that, hey, when we got back to a better place that was more stable with vegan food, I would be able to eat that. So you can't even cling to being vegan, because in those situations you'll feel guilty or shameful or like you've done something wrong. But you can feel confident in knowing, like, hey, 99.9% of the time maybe you're eating vegan, but every once in a while you're going to need to potentially eat something like that. But it's not based in central desire, and it's not based in ignorance. It's just because you're having loving kindness and compassion for this being, and we're at a state in the world where vegan food isn't necessarily always readily available.
All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yeah, you're welcome. I suspect that in the future, long in the future, there's going to be much more vegan food available. We won't see these kinds of challenges in the world.
Yes. I mean, I do see it here that it's growing, but again, it's not 100%.
Yep. Okay, looks like Vibhav, you have a question?
Yeah, David, I had almost a similar experience when I was in Mexico last week. I was similar to I was at a hotel, and one instance was where I'd asked for like a non-alcoholic drink, like I just asked for like a virgin mojito, and the barman accidentally put some rum in it. I tasted it, I figured it was rum, but I gave it back, and I said I need the virgin one. And then there were other instances when I was getting breakfast, and I didn't realize that something had some egg in it. There was like some kind of a dessert or a muffin which had some egg in it, because I'm used to having that egg taste I didn't realize it. And somebody told me it had so I didn't eat it after that. And also there were some vegetables which had some mixed meat in it, but I didn't realize it was meat because I was wearing my glasses. I took the vegetables, I didn't take any meat, but it was still the whole thing was kind of mixed. So it was more out of not knowing and being in that environment rather than actually doing it out of purpose. So how does that affect and it didn't affect the condition of my mind. I was just okay, I did that, I didn't do the right thing, but it's fine. I didn't do it on purpose. How does that affect the condition of karma?
Yeah, so you need to have intention behind any particular decision in order for there to be karma generated. So if you had intended to kill or you have intended to do a particular thing, then the mind is acting based on craving, anger, and ignorance. So there's going to be karma there. But when you're not acting with intention, that you didn't intend to eat these things or drink this particular drink, you just notice whoa, there's some rum in here that needs to go back. So in that situation, you're making the wise choice that's leading to the wholesome karma. So in that situation, you're not experiencing any unwholesome karma. And because you took your time, you didn't just guzzle the drink down, you didn't experience any result of being intoxicated by the alcohol. So here you can see that you didn't experience any unwholesome karma because you didn't make decisions based in craving, anger, or ignorance. Your decisions were based in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And that's why you experience the wholesome karma as a result. But even ingesting any amount of meat or animal products or things like this, there is karma that we're experiencing, but it's very minimal. It's not if you regularly killed and went out into the world and tried to beat people up and stuff like this. But, if you're just having one little sip of an alcoholic drink and you're whoa, that needs to go back, or you're eating some vegetables and you didn't realize that there was meat that was in them, as soon as you realize it, you make a different decision. This isn't producing any unwholesome karma that you need to now extinguish because you made the decision based in wholesome intentions. When you realize that what you had made a decision about wasn't actually what you thought, then you made a different decision. And now your mind is basing all of its decisions in wisdom rather than the three unwholesome roots of craving, anger, or ignorance.
And one last thing on this is that I'm not switched to veganism yet. It doesn't. I guess it's just a choice I've made. It's not something that seems super necessary to me right now. Is that okay? Because I think I just eat vegetarian. I don't necessarily avoid any dairy products.
I didn't hear the
I don't
first
eat
part.
egg, but I don't avoid. I just have the yogurt or
Did
something
you?
if that's available. It's not something that I actively avoid the dairy products.
I didn't hear the first part of your question, Vipal.
I said I'm not vegan yet. I don't necessarily, at least for personally, I don't seem necessary to be vegan yet. I'm vegetarian, but I don't eat egg, but I have not turned fully vegan, or I will have I guess sometimes tea with milk, or if there's yogurt in the food, mixed cream or something I will eat it. I don't feel any. I guess there's no craving for the food exactly, but I don't avoid it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm acting like vegetarian, not like the vegan or the vegopectarian that you were saying. At least I'm vegetarian.
What's your question?
So is that okay? I guess is that still producing some unwholesome karma, not being vegan and being vegetarian?
As long as you're eating any kind of animal products, there's some amount of unwholesome karma that's being generated there, unless you're doing it based on your own health reasons. So I don't know if you guys know, I've shared it with some students last year, or actually 2 years ago now, because we're in a new year. In 2023, my B12 dropped down significantly, and I was starting to have all kinds of symptoms, and I was already on supplements, and it just wasn't working. So I needed to go back to eggs for a period of time, and even some cheese and some ice cream in order to be able to build up my B12 again, because no matter what I was doing with the supplements, it wasn't working. It wasn't being absorbed by the body. So there's going to be some individuals in the world who have all the best intentions, they're training their mind, and they just can't get to an all vegan diet, for an extended period of time, that they're going to need to eat some amount of animal products in order to be able to sustain the life that they're now living. So it's not about asking me whether it's okay or not. This is where you've got to look at your own practice and be doubly sure that you're, attending to the things that you need to attend to. And if right now you're choosing to eat vegetarian, then okay, that's your choice. Then it's okay for you. But the ultimate goal would be to get to an all vegan, plant-based food supply. But when or if somebody does that is always a personal choice. And even in doing so, you might go through periods of time where you need to go back to animal products, because I was eating vegan for about 5 years or so. And then, I needed to go back to some eggs for a period of time. And even now, I still eat some eggs every once in a while just to keep my B12 up, because no matter what I'm doing with the supplements, the body just seems to need a little bit of that every once in a while. And that's the best way to show loving kindness and compassion for this being. But it's not based in sensual desire or ignorance. It's just based in loving kindness and compassion for this being who I am. So if you can get to a point where you completely get rid of all animal products and try to go for that period of time, and maybe you're going to need to take supplements, and you can see if the mind can actually do that. But if you get bogged down and just not even attempting to do that, then there can be potentially some sensual desire there, and you would like to test that and challenge that with the mind.
It's not really sensual desire. It's easier not to have to think through all the stuff that we try to avoid. I mean, it's mostly vegan because Indian food is mostly vegan, but sometimes it's just easier not to for the mind to not have to think through all these things and look at every product out there and see whether it is vegan or not. It just seems at least for personally, it just seems easier to me to just go through this before making the switch at some point if I have to.
Yeah,
that's mostly the reasoning behind it. And I don't drink that much milk anyway. It's mostly sometimes in tea and stuff like that. It's not that I'm actually craving it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little bit easier to just make it through life, I guess.
Yeah, it's important not to be complacent and to cultivate wisdom in all the different areas that you need to cultivate wisdom. So there was a time where I was Googling just about every single thing that I was eating, Googling pizza to see if pizza has any eggs in the dough. I was like, man, I'm going to need to give up pizza. And I was like, hold on a second, let me check this. And then I checked and I was like, oh, sweet, pizza doesn't have eggs in the dough. This is perfect. I can still eat pizza, right? So if I needed to give up pizza, I would. There's definitely periods of time where I went long periods without pizza. So every single thing that your mind is experiencing, you would like to go through a period of time where you've given it up. So I gave up desserts entirely for a good 6 months to a year. I gave up pizza entirely for a good long while. I stopped being on Facebook for 3 years at one point. I just wasn't even on that at all. So you're going to need to test and challenge the mind. And if you don't do that, you're not going to know necessarily whether there's a craving, desire, attachment there. So don't allow the mind to be complacent and just be like, oh, well, it's easier if I just drink this milk. Instead, you're going to need to do research to figure out what things have and what things don't have. This is part of the wisdom that you cultivate. And then you're going to need to go periods of time where you don't ingest that thing, because you don't need tea and milk in order to sustain your life. So that's something that you would like to go away from for a period of time to make sure the mind's not attached to it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me check if we have anything. Looks like Mayuli has a question here. Mayuli's asking, teacher, I have a question. A dermatologist prescribed a topical cream for the face. The face experienced an allergic reaction to the cream that caused burning sensation and redness, causing hyperpigmentation on the face. In the past, if this situation occurred, the discontentedness would have been 10 out of 10. Now it is about 3 out of 10, but able to cut it off and let it go, knowing is impermanent. It's impermanent. Does this mean that personal existence views still exist? Yeah, the mind is still clinging to a certain degree there to the body. So personal existence view, like we were talking last week, is understanding that there is nothing here that could be considered you or a self. But getting to enlightenment is to eliminate the clinging to it. So the mind clinging to this body is why there's still a 3 out of 10 discontentedness. And when you fully eliminate the clinging to the body, this is where then you'll experience complete peace and joy. Even though the face is having some kind of hyperpigmentation, you wouldn't experience any kind of discontentedness associated with it. So you would like to get to a point where you understand that this body is in you, this mind is in you, and then ultimately get to a point where you've eliminated any clinging to the self-image or the self-identity. But then more clearly, you need to eliminate clinging to all the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. Okay, so it looks like Marcy, you would like to read? Is that what that's for? Or,
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go to this next one. And let me just check. This is a really long one. So I'm just going to have you read the top section. And then after that, I'll explain what the rest of it is.
Sure. Right views of various kinds. According to Venerable Sariputta, the wholesome and the unwholesome. When friends, a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, and that in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the teaching and has arrived at these true teachings. And what, friends, is unwholesome? What is the root of unwholesome? What is wholesome? What is the root of wholesome? Killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given is unwholesome. Misconduct in sexual pleasure and sensual pleasures is unwholesome. False speech is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Gossip is unwholesome. Craving is unwholesome. Ill will is unwholesome. Wrong view is unwholesome. This is called unwholesome. And what is the root of unwholesome? Craving is the root of unwholesome. Anger is the root of unwholesome. Ignorance is the root of unwholesome. This is called the root of unwholesome. And what is wholesome? Abstaining from killing living beings is wholesome. Abstaining from taking what is not given is wholesome. Abstaining from misconduct in sensual pleasures is wholesome. Abstaining from false speech is wholesome. Abstaining from malicious speech is wholesome. Abstaining from harsh speech is wholesome. Abstaining from gossip is wholesome. Non-craving, generosity, is wholesome. Non-ill will, loving kindness, is wholesome. Right view, wisdom, is wholesome. This is called wholesome. And what is the root of wholesome? Non-craving, generosity, is the root of wholesomeness. Non-anger, loving kindness, is the root of wholesomeness. Ignorance, wisdom, is the root of wholesomeness. This is called the root of wholesomeness. When a noble disciple has understood the wholesome and the root of has understood the unwholesome and the root of unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of wholesome, he entirely abandons the underlying tendencies of craving. He abolishes the underlying tendencies to anger. He completely destroys the underlying tendencies to the view and conceit I am, and by abandoning ignorance and arousing true wisdom, he here and now makes an end of discontentedness. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the teaching, and has arrived at these true teachings.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, these are the part of right views. even though we talk about establishment and right view, and it's the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha talked about various kinds of views that one needs to adopt in order to be able to see the truth and get to enlightenment. And here he's talking about the wholesome and unwholesome. And these are things that you guys have studied before, but now he's talking about it in terms of a view and understanding what is unwholesome and understanding what is wholesome and understanding the root of these two things too. So here he's talking about what is unwholesome are these things here. And these are all unwholesome. And then the root of that is craving, anger, and ignorance, which is what you guys have learned before of the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires, or the three poisons. And then he's talking about the wholesome, which is just the opposite of the unwholesome. And then the root of the wholesome is just the opposite of the unwholesome, which is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which you guys have already been exposed to. And what he's saying is that when you learn these and you understand these, that then this is what's going to help you to actually abandon them. By you understanding the wholesome and the unwholesome, then you can abandon the unwholesome and you can arise the wholesome, and ultimately get to the point where you eliminate this conceit, I am. So this is where the mind is now experiencing enlightenment, where the mind is now made an end of discontentedness. And since Mayuli just asked the question that she asked, let me just be really clear on this. So when you have eliminated your view of anything that could potentially be a self, when you realize that this body nor this mind is who you are as a person, this is eliminating personal existence view. When the mind eliminates its clinging to these things, this is where the mind eliminates conceit of I am this and I am that. And now this is where the mind can move into enlightenment. So this is the difference between personal existence view, having just understood and not be able to identify anything that is a personal existence, that you understand this body isn't you, these feelings aren't you, your perceptions aren't you, your choice of decisions aren't you, and your consciousness or the mind is not you. That's eliminating personal existence view, where you've eliminated the view that any of these things are you and who you are as a person. But when you eliminate the clinging to those five aggregates, this is where you eliminate the conceit I am, that I am this or I am that. And that's where you've actually eliminated that. And now the mind can more fully move into enlightenment. So in your case, Mayuli, you might have eliminated personal existence view already, potentially, but there's still that conceit. There's still that I am. I am this face. And now when it has this hyperpigmentation, you experience that 3 out of 10 of discontentedness, because there's still this I am. That still clinging is holding on to the body, thinking that I am this body. So this is what you were asking about before, but it also relates to this chapter, because the Buddha is talking about the unwholesome and the wholesome, and eliminating the unwholesome craving, anger, and ignorance, and then arising the wholesome is what's going to bring the mind to the end of discontentedness. And then what he does here at the end of this, or throughout this, is he's talking about all these other factors, all these other things that need to be cultivated in order to make your way through development of the mind. And these are related to dependent origination, these last several. And you guys would have already read this potentially if you've read the book, but if not, you can go back and read these. And he talks about the Four Noble Truths in here, so you can read these and you can understand it, and then just ask me what questions you guys have, because here this is something new that I don't think you guys have seen yet in our study of this iteration of the Pali Canon, is where the Buddha is talking about this nutriment. What the nutriment is where you're like feeding the mind what it needs in order to continue its existence. If you continue to feed the mind craving, anger, and ignorance, and you allow that to reside in the mind, then you're giving the mind the nutriment of what it needs to be able to spawn and create a new mind at the end of this life. But if you extinguish this, if you essentially starve the mind of its craving, anger, and ignorance, then you're eliminating the nutriment for continued existence. You're eliminating the qualities or the aspects of the mind that are going to allow it to continue to exist over and over and over again. So one of the things that you're doing is you're eliminating the nutriment of these things. So here you can see it where the Buddha says, with the arising of craving, there is the arising of nutriment. So as long as you allow craving to exist in the mind, you're giving the mind this nutriment that's going to nourish it and it's going to keep it in existence. But with the elimination of craving, there's elimination of the nutriment, the ability for this mind to continue to go forward. So the way to eliminate this nutriment is the Eightfold Path. That's what's going to extinguish those aspects of the mind that allow it to continue. So you would like to essentially starve the mind of this nutriment so that it can't continue to experience discontentedness and continue to experience rebirth over and over and over again. Okay, let me know what questions you guys have here. And if you have any questions on the things that are below this, you definitely can ask those. But it's just so long that we're not going to be able to read it in class. So it looks like Marcy, you have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I've noticed within the Buddhist teaching, he refers to wholesome and unwholesomeness. Would it be wise to understand that wholesome is right and unwholesome is wrong? So like we have the Noble Eightfold Path, everything is right view, right intention, right. Could we interchange that as a way of saying wholesome? Wholesome intentions, wholesome view?
Yeah, you could replace right view with wholesome if you like. Another way that people think about it is righteous view or righteous intention, meaning like proper, the proper way to have intentions in the mind, the proper way to speak or things like this. But I don't suggest you think of things as right and wrong, right? That's not what the Buddha is really saying, even though we use that word like wrong view, wrong speech. We do use that, but you're not interested in coming at it from an angle of conceit. Like those people are doing something wrong. We're doing what's right. That would be conceit and judgment, where you're judging other people. So this word wholesome and unwholesome works best. Some people translate this as bad and good, but wholesome and unwholesome is a much better way to think about it. And I don't think about things as other people doing something wrong, but instead like proper view, proper intention, or improper view or improper intention. This is one of the ways to think about it. Or righteous view, like the proper way to practice in the world that's going to lead to this enlightened mental state.
I'm glad you used the word righteous, because there was a conversation where, the word righteous seemed to the person I was having the conversation with as putting someone above, like that self-righteous, which when I look at it as self-righteous, that means, to me, I feel there's a lot of ego there. But righteous in their interpretation is like saying this is above, whereas righteous is up here and, you are down here in a sense. Mm-hmm. So I, was more of an understanding that when I look at the Noble Eightfold Path, instead of thinking like right or righteous or this is the only way that has to be done or whatever, that sometimes it was a little bit more digestible when I said wholesome. You know what I mean? So I was just, trying to provide clarity to the mind about, a way to really view this where there's not that stigmatism to the word right, wrong, righteous, and all of that, where it was just more palatable, I think, is a good word to use.
Yeah, some people don't use the word righteous in the way that it's defined in the dictionary. Some people think about the word righteous as being like putting yourself above people, because that's what some people do when they're thinking about things in a righteous way. But the actual meaning, if you look up the word righteous, means acting in accordance with divine or moral law. Right? So what the Buddha is teaching is this moral law, which is this natural laws of existence. So that's why we could refer to it as righteous intention or righteous speech, because this is speech that correlates with the moral law or the laws of existence, the natural laws of existence. But oftentimes people are like, look at him trying to be so righteous. And that's because people who feel like they're practicing a certain level of moral conduct, they tend to try to put themselves above other people because of the conceit that's in there. But if you get rid of the conceit and you just understand like, no, this is the righteous speech or this is the righteous action, meaning like this is the actions that correlate to the natural laws of existence. That's what the word righteous actually means. But people tend to not use it that way.
Thank you, Teacher David. That actually eliminated some ignorance that I now taking and actually defining a word for its true meaning is probably a more wiser way of going at it when someone is using words in their own understanding, in a sense. Like, you know what I mean? If they have their own defined understanding of a word, to actually sit with them and say, okay, well, let's look up this word. Let's see what the true definition is of that word. May have helped. Thank you very much. I appreciate that a great deal.
Yeah, what you're going to see is impermanence has affected the English language too. And different people think about words in different ways. And I had to do a lot of digging through dictionaries in order to come to understanding of what vocabulary I was using and what it actually means and what other people were using. This is part of the wisdom that one needs to cultivate in their journey.
Yeah, that's funny. I have a little pocket dictionary that I used to carry with me when I worked EMS, just to kind of look up certain things. And maybe I should bring that pocket dictionary back out and keep it in my back pocket now so that I can look up stuff. Thank you.
Well, nowadays they have all that stuff online, Marcy.
I know. I kind of enjoy, maybe I have an attachment to having books in my hands because I do enjoy picking up a book.
Well, if that's the case, then you need to let that go. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere, so I'm going to move on to the next one. You guys can see how long this one is. It's got all this detail from dependent origination in here. Got to scroll and scroll and scroll. Okay, so now we get to chapter 45. It looks like Pat would like to read that one. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Factors for stream entry, first discourse. Then the Venerable Sariputta approached the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one said to him, Sariputta, this is said, a factor for stream entry, a factor for stream entry. What now, Sariputta, is a factor for stream entry? 1. Association with wholesome persons, Venerable Sir, is a factor for stream entry. 2. Hearing the true teachings is a factor for stream entry. 3. Careful attention is a factor for stream entry. 4. Practice in accordance with the teachings is a factor for stream entry. Good, Sariputta. Association with wholesome persons, Sariputta, is a factor for stream entry. Hearing the true teachings is a factor for stream entry. Careful attention is a factor for stream entry. Practice in accordance with the teachings is a factor for stream entry. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pat. So here we've got a discourse where the Buddha is talking about 4 things that are needing to be practiced in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. Again, these aren't the only 4, but these are 4 aspects. And you're going to see some more here in a moment, but these are just 4 things among all the other things that one would be doing as part of getting to stream entry. And the first one here is associating with wholesome persons. Like, you're not going to continue to be with people who are into unwholesome things. Like that friend you have from childhood who's selling drugs and standing on the street corner. You're going to know the natural law of Dhamma too well that this is going to impact you. If you're walking down the street, a rival drug dealer is shooting bullets, and next thing you know, this bullet's going to catch you. And a person who understands the natural law of Dhamma understands how unwise that is, and they're going to associate with people who are into wholesome things. It's not that you're required to do that. It's not that anyone's forcing you to do that or anything like that. It's just that the mind's going to start doing that on its own, that you'll associate with people who are into wholesome things. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to have access to the true teachings. This is having access to the original words of the Buddha, which you guys actually have, and you're hearing these teachings regularly. Paying careful attention means that you'll understand the natural law of Dhamma so well that you will pay careful attention to each individual decision that you're making. You're still making some unwise decisions as a stream enterer, but you're at least paying attention to the decisions you're making. You're not just haphazardly implementing decisions in the world. You're paying attention to these things because you understand that every decision you make is going to produce a result, either wholesome or unwholesome. And it all depends on whether your decision is wise or unwise, so you're going to pay careful attention to all your decisions. And then you will be practicing in accordance with the teachings. You won't be practicing perfectly at this point. It's only when you're enlightened that the mind's actually practicing perfectly, but you're aspiring to practice in accordance with the teachings, and you're actively improving each and every day. This is what the Buddha is saying are the 4 factors of stream entry, but there's others as well that we're going to study here in a moment. Any questions on this one? Okay, pleased to help you, Mayuli. Great that you understand now. All right, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
David, this is on the first part, the association with the wholesome persons, and I know we discussed this in private message as well, is to, basically the idea is to cut off association with people which will end up producing unwholesome karma. But it's like very hard to do, like, being a householder and working and having friends who are not super wholesome. I mean, some people, everybody has some wholesomeness, but you're always in situations where, you encounter unwholesomeness. Even like if you're like just meeting friends or something, they might be doing something which is unwholesome. And so how do we really associate with the wholesome person more while still living in this world where you're working with coworkers or friends?
You'll need to eliminate any clinging to those relationships and realize that if there's people who are doing unwholesome things and you associating with these individuals, it's going to impact you. Because if you're looking to get to the peace and the joy where you're only experiencing wholesome things in your life, if you're still making decisions to associate with people who are doing these unwise decisions, and the clinging to this friend is going to now produce unwholesome results in your life.
Well, there's no clinging as such, but I mean, you're not like, so it's not like, in the example you gave it like, it's not somebody who's dealing drugs or stuff like that. It's more like, somebody talks something which is, I guess that's unwholesome, like using wrong speech, or, you're invited somewhere there, like alcohol is like flows freely. Any party, any place you go to, you're hanging with co-workers, there's always some alcohol around. So you're not really clinging to the relationship, but you're in situations where other people are doing this stuff, you're not doing it. But you do catch some part of the conversation where, like one example was I met some friends from my previous work like a few weeks ago. And we went to a restaurant, but they were having drinks. I didn't have anything. But the conversation in some places goes down to like either unwholesome speech or some unwholesome, actions. Small ones, not really anything big, but you do end up being in situations where you rather not say anything. So it's just that if you're in a situation where somebody is saying something or doing something, we just like ignore it, will not create that unwholesome karma.
Yeah, these are situations that you need to look at piece by piece. You can't just take a blanket, paintbrush and paint everybody who's doing something that's opposite of the teachings as unwholesome, right? You need to look at how this person is practicing, not in a judgmental way, and then also how what they're practicing is affecting you. So, for example, one time I had a student ask me about their grandparents, that they were saying like when they go out to eat dinner with their grandparents at the restaurant, that their grandparents are very aggressive and hostile and bitter and harsh to the waiters and the waitresses and the food servers. And they said, I've gotten to a point where not even interested to go out to dinner with them anymore, but I still go to their house and have dinner with them there. So this is a person that's figured out like it's unwise for me to go out to dinner with them because now I'm sitting in a situation where they're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to the food servers, and now me sitting at the table, the food servers are associating that conduct with me. But I can instead just go to their house and I can spend time with them there, and now them being bitter, harsh, and hostile to food servers doesn't affect me. So this is where, when you understand the natural law of karma, you can decipher it and you can see very clearly how to make wise decisions to ensure that you're having ability to spend time with people who are maybe doing things that are unwise, but it's not impacting you in those situations. Because the only people who are practicing 100% as the way that the Buddha taught are enlightened beings. So if you were only ever friends with enlightened beings, you wouldn't have very many friends until you have more and more and more community members in our community that are getting to enlightenment. So you're going to need to be able to decipher these situations, because somebody just using some speech in an unwise way, it wouldn't necessarily come to the level of this is an unwholesome person and now I need to end my friendship and walk away. But you're going to need to look at each one of these situations and make sure that you're not in a situation where your decision to associate with them is now impacting you in an unwholesome way.
So I guess one small example is like one of my friends, and I told him that we talked about that I sent him the invitation for the course and everything. And then he was trying to tell me that these are like following, Buddhism or following your teacher's advice is not how men should behave. You should be drinking and you should be doing whatever. He was like, and I was just like sitting there and trying to figure out, like, he was trying to put his own stuff on top of me. And he's like, hey, it was very uncomfortable being in this situation and just sitting with him and listening to him what he's saying, and he's trying to push his own, expectations on me on how people should behave and how men should behave. Like, so it was very, very uncomfortable for me going. So I've kind of decided not to hang out with him. But there'll be other people as well who behave in such a way. So it's just kind of, the number of people kind of dwindles down on if you want to really hang out with on a daily basis.
Yeah, so that's the craving and clinging there. If you were uncomfortable in that situation, then there was craving and clinging, and just leaving from that friend isn't going to solve the problem. It doesn't mean that you should necessarily stay in the relationship, but just leaving away from this friend isn't going to solve your craving and clinging to whatever was happening in that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So let's go to the next one, chapter 46, which this one is similar to ones that we've seen before. And since we have so many discourses to study today, let me just make sure you guys see this. This is basically the Buddha saying there's 4 things that a stream enterer will basically have cultivated. And these are things that we've actually studied before, where he's talking about confidence in him, right? Confidence in the teachings, confidence in the community. These are the 3 triple gem. But then he's also talking about this stain of selfishness, that an individual doesn't have this. In order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to live open-handedly and joyful and practicing generosity. So these are 4 things that a stream enterer will have developed and cultivated: confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they will be practicing generosity, giving and sharing joyfully. Any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So let's go to the next one. This is another one where the Buddha is giving it more factors of what it takes to get to this first stage of enlightenment. Let me just see what we've got here, because this one I remember, this one's pretty long too. And I'm going to need to just kind of move through some of these so that you guys get a chance to ask any questions. Let me see. I have to go to oneself. Do you guys have any questions on this one? For those of you guys that have studied it, this is one that you guys can read. This one is very straightforward and things that you guys should be able to easily understand. Maybe that's why there's no questions, or maybe you guys just haven't read it before class. So let me just check. I don't see any questions there. I'm going to just move through. We have so many chapters today, some of these really long ones and some of the ones that are pretty straightforward. No need to actually go into these. This is another one. This is the 10 modes, which is what we were just studying. Let me see if we have anything here that needs to be discussed. If you guys have any questions on any of these that I'm skipping over, feel free to let me know and I will answer your question. I'm not seeing anything here that pops out that you guys would have difficulties to understand. Okay, so I'm just going to keep on going since I don't see any questions. So this is one similar to what we just studied. This is the benefit of 4 things. These are the 4 things that we just actually talked about: association with wholesome persons, hearing the true teachings, careful attention, and practice in accordance with the teachings. So by practicing those, This is what leads to the realization of the fruit of stream entry, or actually getting to the first stage of enlightenment, but it also leads to these other attainments as well. Without these four things, you wouldn't be able to get to these, where you're actually not only in the first stage of enlightenment, but also in the second, third, and fourth, right? So that's what's actually going to lead to that. So it's important to cultivate these qualities that the Buddha is sharing that leads to the first stage of enlightenment, because this is what's going to actually lead to enlightenment itself. If you don't get to the first stage of enlightenment, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. And then he goes into detail about all these different wisdoms. This is where, if you have any doubt that the teachings of the Buddha is to not have belief, but instead to cultivate wisdom, you can see it right here. Because the Buddha says, monks, these four things, when developed and cultivated, lead to obtaining wisdom, growth of wisdom, expansion of wisdom, greatness of wisdom, extensiveness of wisdom, vastness of wisdom, depth of wisdom. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, where you can see the ultimate goal of the path to enlightenment is to cultivate wisdom. And that's why rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't what the Buddha taught. And he didn't teach you to believe anything, but to cultivate wisdom. And that's what these four things are going to help you to be able to get to, is the cultivation of wisdom. That's why it's so important to associate with wholesome persons, for example. If you're into groups of people who are doing unwise things and unwholesome things, your mind's going to have a tendency to lean towards that. But if you're using Vibhav's example in a work environment, and you show up to a work event and there's people drinking beer and alcohol and things like this, and maybe you just show up for a brief period just to show your face, and this is something that you need to do for your professional career. Maybe you're there for 45 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half, and before people get really drunk, you're out the door. Maybe you show up really early, you're there in the early part of the party, and then you're gone before people really start getting inebriated. And you just did this in order to really kind of show your face at this work party. But you're not choosing to associate in these situations where people are getting intoxicated and inebriated. You're choosing to leave out of the situation. So this is why you would like to do this, because you're cultivating wisdom. And these four things are going to lead to the cultivation of wisdom. So let me know if you guys have questions here. This is chapter 49, the benefit of these four things. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to chapter 50. This is once again one that we can just look at this one. We don't necessarily need to read it. So this first part, the Buddha is talking about this individual who's a trainee and who is an actual trainee. So here is where you can see that the method that the Buddha used when someone first becomes a brand new student, because that's what a trainee is, a brand new student, is he shares the Four Noble Truths. And you can see this in other places of his teachings, that's the first place to start, is the Four Noble Truths. And then once you've had the Four Noble Truths understood, then that's where he moves on to other teachings. And you can see in other parts of his teachings where he moves into moral conduct next. And that's the very next thing that he teaches after the Four Noble Truths, is the moral conduct. And then he's talking about these faculties, these 5 spiritual faculties, which are things you probably know about, but you haven't necessarily thought about them in terms of spiritual faculties. And what a spiritual faculty is something that's going to help you to develop wisdom and cultivation of the mind, and ultimately get to the final goal of enlightenment itself. That you're going to need to develop confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, in the community. You're going to need to develop energy, which is a willingness to do something, enthusiasm, motivation. You can't be complacent and just be like, well, I'm not going to get to that, or I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to do this, and just be dull and lethargic. You need to have the willingness to do something, vigor, vitality. Then there's the faculty of mindfulness, which you need to cultivate this awareness of the mind. You need to have the concentration or the focus, the clarity, the practice of singleness of mind. And then you need to develop your wisdom. So these are the 5 spiritual faculties that are going to actually lead to continuous growth on the path to enlightenment. Is confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, having willingness to do something, because you're going to need to pick up that book, you're going to need to come to class, you're going to need to choose to meditate, you're going to need to have that enthusiasm and that vigor. You're going to need to have this mindfulness or awareness of mind, so that you can be aware of what's going through the mind and take action when there's unwholesome qualities there, and then also to support and encourage the wholesome qualities. You're going to need to have focus and concentration, the singleness of mind, and you're going to need to cultivate wisdom, where you understand what is wise and unwise. And this is 5 qualities that's going to help you to be able to be propelled towards enlightenment. And this is what the Buddha is saying that is needed in order to really be considered a trainee, is these types of things. So let me know if you guys have questions on this one. This is chapter 50. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So let's continue on. Let's see what we've got here. Virtue lower than the stream enter that does not lead to bad destinations. Let me see how long. Let's read this one. Okay, is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, the first one there was Yihang, and then we'll go to Keely after that.
Thank you. Virtue lower than the stream enter that does not lead to bad destinations. One who does not go to bad destinations. First discourse. Here, Mahanama, some person does not possess confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. He is not of joyous wisdom, nor of swift wisdom, and he has not attained liberation. However, he has these 5 things: the faculty of confidence, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, the faculty of wisdom. And the teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata are understood by him after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom. This person too, Mahanama, is one who does not go to hell, the animal realm or the realm of afflicted spirits, to the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. One who does not go to bad destinations. Second discourse. Here, Mahanama, some person does not possess confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. He is not one of joyous wisdom nor of swift wisdom, and he has not attained liberation. However, he has these 5 things: the faculty of confidence, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, the faculty of wisdom, and he has sufficient confidence in the Tathagata, sufficient devotion to him. This person too, Mahanama, is one who does not go to hell, the animal realm, or the realm of afflicted spirits, to the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So if you've been taught in other traditions that there's kind of like one way to do something, like in order to get to heaven, you have to do this thing and everybody has to do this particular thing. It's kind of like there's one door to heaven, right? And that would be permanence, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you is that by getting to the first stage of enlightenment, you're no longer going to be reborn into the lower realms ever, ever, ever. But there's individuals who aren't yet in the first stage of enlightenment, but they're also not going to be reborn down into the lower realms in their next life, right? And these are 2 examples of those types of individuals. So it's not like there's one door for these kinds of things, because that would be permanence. So the Buddha is giving you examples of other situations where people aren't being reborn into the lower realms. And one of the things that you can do with a discourse like this, because whether you're reborn in any particular realm or not is in the future. You don't have to necessarily pay close attention to that. Just focus on getting to enlightenment. But instead, what you can do here is you can look at the qualities that the Buddha is talking about here and then cultivate that. So here he's saying that a person does not possess confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, a joyous wisdom, nor of swift wisdom, and he has not attained liberation. So the mind's not enlightened, right? So this person doesn't have confidence yet, but they have the faculty, meaning they have been working on this. It's something that their mind has the capability to work towards, that they're developing these things, but they're still in process of being developed. So in this particular situation, you can see how important these 5 spiritual faculties are, because it's going to help your mind to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. But for some reason, if you fall short of that, it's also going to help you to not be reborn into the lower realms. And then the Buddha essentially is saying something similar down here in the second discourse. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So is this in specific correlation to a jhana?
This is not necessarily specifically correlating to a jhana.
Okay, I also have another question, which is when it says swift wisdom, is that basically like how it talks about like thinking and pondering? Does it then go to like swift wisdom where you can kind of just play it by ear very easily?
Yeah, you just know the wisdom. You're not playing it by ear, but you know it with 100% certainty because you've independently verified enough of the teachings that you're able to easily know the answer to any particular challenge or situation that you're experiencing. You just know what would be wise or unwise.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, by the way, Janae, somebody that is experiencing these things could be in the jhanas, but not necessarily. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll move on to the next one. Here, this is chapter 52, the 7 factors of the fruit of stream entry. So this one is something that we can read. I don't think it's very long, or actually it is. It's pretty long here. I didn't remember that. So I try to keep these classes to 2 hours at the maximum. So today we have a bunch of teachings. We have this chapter and one more chapter. So let me see what this next chapter is. Okay, so let's go ahead and read this chapter 52 because this one has a lot of meat in it that's going to help you guys. So Vibhav or Kaylee, I think Kaylee had volunteered. Vibhav, is that a question that you have? No, that was for reading? Okay, go ahead, Keely.
Okay, thank you, Teacher David. The 7 factors of the fruit of stream entry. Monks, there are these 6 principles of cordiality that create love and respect and conduce the cohesion to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. What are the 6? 1. Here a monk maintains bodily acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 2. Again, a monk maintains verbal acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, to unity. 3. Again, a monk maintains mental acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 4. Again, a monk uses things in common with his virtuous companions in the holy life. Without making reservations, he shares with them any gain of a kind that accords with the teachings and has been obtained in a way that accords with the teachings, including even the mere contents of his bowl. This too is a principle of a cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, to unity. 5. Again, a monk resides both in public and in private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life those virtuous moral conduct that are unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 6. Again, a monk resides both in public and in private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life that right will that is noble and liberating, and leads one who practices in accordance with it to the to complete destruction of discontentedness. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. These are the 6 principles of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. Of these 6 principles of cordiality, the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying is the will, right will that is noble and liberating, and which leads the one who practices in accordance with it to complete destruction of discontentedness. Just as the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying part of a pinnacle house is the pinnacle itself, so too, of these 6 principles of cordiality, the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying is this will, right will, that is noble and liberating, and which leads the one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness. And how does this will, right will that is noble and liberating lead to the one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness? Here a monk, gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or to an empty hut, considers thus, is there any obsession abandoned in myself that my soul obsess my mind that I cannot know or see things as they actually are? If a monk is obsessed by sensual desire, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by ill will, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by complacency, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by restlessness and worry, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by doubt, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk is absorbed in speculation about this world, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk is absorbed in speculation about the other world, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk takes to arguing and brawling and is deep in disputes, stabbing others with verbal daggers, then his mind is obsessed. He understands thus, there is no obsession abandoned in myself that my soul obsess my mind that I cannot know and see things as they actually are. My mind is well disposed for awakening to the truths. This is the first wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcendent, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this will, right will, do I personally obtain serenity? Do I personally obtain quenching? He understands thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this will, right will, I personally obtain serenity. I personally obtain quenching. This is the second wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcendent, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, is there any other ascetics or Brahmin outside the Buddha's teaching possessed of a will, right will, such as I possess? He understands thus, there is no other ascetic or Brahmin outside the Buddha's teachings possessed a will, right will, such as I possess. This is the third wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcendent, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right will? What is the character of a person who possesses right will. This is the character of a person who possesses right will, although he may commit some kind of mistake for which a means or rehabilitation has been laid down, still he at once confesses, reveals and discloses to it the teacher or to the wise companions in the holy life, and having done that, he enters upon restraint from the future. Just as a young, tender infant lying prone at once drawing back when he puts his hand or foot on the live coal, so too, this is the character of a person who possesses right will. He understands thus, I possesses the character of a person who possesses right will. This is the full wisdom attained by him that is noble, worth transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right will? What is the character of a person who possesses right will? This is the character of a person who possesses right will. Although he may be active in various matters for his companions in his holy life, yet he has a determined regard for training in the higher virtuous behavior, moral conduct, the training in the higher mind, mental discipline, and the training in the higher wisdom, just as a cow with a new calf, while she grazes, watches her calf, so too that is the character of a person who possesses right will. He understands thus, I possess the character of a person who possesses right will. This is the fifth wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right will? What is the strength of a person who possesses right will? This is the strength of a person who possesses right will. When the teachings and this discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he heeds it, gives it attention, engages it with all his mind, hears the teachings as with enthuses the ears. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right will. This is the sixth wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right will? What is the strength of a person who possesses right will? This is the strength of a person who possesses right will. When the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the teaching, gains joyfulness connected with the teachings. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right will. This is the seventh wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of seven factors, he has well sought the character of realization of the fruit of stream entry. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of seven factors, he possesses the fruit of stream entry. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Keely. So this is a great chapter to check in on your right view, to determine whether or not you're established right view or not. And the Buddha talks about these six things first, about how to lead to the fruit of stream entry. And here, these are six things that you can check in on about your bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions of loving kindness, both public and private, about members of your community. That if you're talking, gossiping, and slandering about people, both either in public or private, that are members of this community, the Buddha is saying that, you're not practicing in the way of a stream enter. A stream enter wouldn't do those kinds of things. And then he talks about these other things here that you can see that he's discussing, that, in terms of your moral conduct and your cohesion and the way that you live in harmony and unity in accordance with the teachings. And then he talks here about right view, that an individual who is going to be a stream enter would have cultivated right view. And then he says, out of all 6 of these things, right view is the most important out of all 6 of those things. And then he really dives into right view, and he talks about how to ensure that you've actually established right view. And you can catch it towards the end of each one of these paragraphs, right here, where he says, if a monk takes to arguing and brawling and deep in dispute, stabbing others with verbal daggers, then his mind is obsessed. Right? So this is something that someone with right view wouldn't be doing. And then he goes through some of these other ones here too, that if you guys caught the end of these paragraphs, you can see what he's talking about here. Let me get to some other ones down here. Here he is, where he says an individual with right view would be listening to the teachings. His mind would have enthusiastic ears as he hears the teachings, that the mind's kind of leaning forward and really interested in hearing the teachings. Because if you've established right view, then you know that it's a matter of learning and practicing these teachings, and you'd have enthusiastic ears to listen. So then the Buddha goes down here and he talks about that you gain meaning and inspiration. You have this joyfulness whenever you hear the teachings and you're interested in learning the teachings. You have this joyfulness and this inspiration as you're hearing the teachings. So you can go through a discourse like this and really take it apart, where some of these things that he repeats over and over and over again, you can kind of, just know what he's saying there, and then set that aside, and then really focus in on the qualities that he's talking about here. Then you can check in with yourself and see if that's what you're practicing and that's what you're experiencing. And don't just overlook this and just try to get to the conclusion that I'm practicing right view and I have established right view. But no, you need to deeply look at this and really check in on this objectively, not subjectively, but objectively look at this and determine whether or not you're actually practicing these. Because the danger would be that you just kind of gloss over these things and that you don't really pay attention to it, and you actually haven't established right view. You're kind of putting together this practice like a house of cards, and then at some point in the future it all falls apart on you. You would like to build this really strong foundation and not just gloss over things. I've seen that happen to many people, where they just kind of put things together and they don't really look at it thoroughly, and they don't really build a really good foundation, and even 2 or 3 years down the road their practice falls apart on them. So you would like to really pay attention to these kinds of things and really dig into the details of this discourse. So let me know if you guys have questions on this chapter. Thank you, Keely, for reading it. It's quite a long one. I know, just imagine the Buddha actually speaking this from memory, right? And imagine the noble disciples, the ordained practitioners after his death to actually remember this and write it down. It's quite amazing that they have that ability, right? Okay, let me know if you guys have questions. Looks like Mayuli has a question here. She says, go back to the previous chapter, teacher. For example, if I was to die today, even though I have not reached any stage of enlightenment, I will most likely not be reborn in hell, correct? If you have cultivated those qualities that the Buddha was talking about, then the answer would be yes. So that's something that you would need to look at to see if you have those faculties that he's talking about, or you've cultivated those qualities that he's talking about. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So now this last one, let's look at this one. I think it might be similar to what we've done before. Let me just check in on this one. Encourage, settle, and establish in the 4 factors of stream entry. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll explain to you what the Buddha is talking about. What he's talking about here is that for anybody who you have compassion for, meaning concern for their misfortune, and you think that they will heed your advice, whether they're friends, colleagues, relatives, or kinsmen, then he suggests that you should encourage, settle, and establish them in these 4 factors of the first stage of enlightenment, which is help them establish confidence in the Buddha, confidence in the teachings, confidence in the community, and this moral conduct that he's talking about. right? So if you have people in your life like that, he's saying that you should make an effort to establish them in these kinds of things. So I'll give you some examples of this. So there are times where my sister might be really struggling with a certain thing, and I know the teachings of the Buddha will help her with this, but she doesn't really know the teachings of the Buddha. So she might be explaining a certain thing to me, and I'll say, the Buddha is so wise, he actually has a teaching on this that could really help you, right? I'm not pushing it on her. I'm not giving her unsolicited advice. I'm just saying, hey, the Buddha has a really good teaching about this that could really actually help you in this situation, right? And now it's up to her to say, oh, really? What is that? And now I'll share it with her, right? But if she's not interested, then I wouldn't share it with her. So this is me trying to encourage, settle, and establish her in confirmed confidence in the Buddha or the teachings, right? Or let me give you an example on this moral conduct. So when I was growing up, there were times where I spent a lot of times with my grandparents. And my grandparents grew up in the 1920s, which was a very different time in America than now. And there was a certain amount of racism that existed. It exists now, and it existed back then too, quite significantly. They grew up in an era where certain color of skin ate in the restaurant, and a certain color of skin went behind the restaurant, or there were different water fountains for different people. And I would hear about these things, and they would tell me about these things, how they grew up in these kinds of environments. And every once in a while I would hear them say something that would be racist, and I would kind of mention to them about these kinds of things. And this was me trying to encourage, settle, and establish them in good, wholesome moral conduct, and realizing that they don't need to think about people that way. And both of them, ultimately transformed, and they no longer thought that way. But it was through this gentle humbleness of kind of sharing things with them here and there, and doing what the Buddha's talking about up here, that if you have compassion for people, concern for their misfortune, and they're a friend, a colleague, or relative, or something like this, and you think they will heed your advice, there are skillful ways to help them gain this confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and to practice improved moral conduct. But you need to be very careful here that you're not giving unsolicited guidance, or that you're not doing it through your own ego or your own craving or your anger or something like this. You need to be really skillful when you're doing these kinds of things. And as if you've done those things, there might be situations where people choose to get deeper into the teachings. Like my grandmother, for example, has always been very interested in anything that I'm doing around the teachings of the Buddha. She's even read the first book before, and she's a very avid reader, and she's in her hundreds now. She's over 100, and she's interested in these kinds of things, and that's because we've had these kinds of conversations. So what the Buddha is teaching you is that this is a way for you to kind of softly recommend people to kind of get established in these teachings. And some of you guys might be doing this with the people that are around you. But ultimately, like I mentioned, you need to be sure you're not doing this through your own craving or your own ego, because that's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 53 of volume 4. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. So my question has more of an experience that the mind was having during the chapter that Keely was reading. The mind, I felt this lightness in the body and in the mind, and it seemed as though things were seemed brighter. And I felt very, how would I say, I don't want to say like excited, but just very light. And I'm having an issue with the mind saying, is this an attachment? Am I having an attachment to the Buddha's teachings right now? Or am I finding some gleams of information that are maturing the mind, that are benefiting the mind?
You can sit with that and look at it and see for yourself, but it's not uncommon for, as you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, to feel these shifts that are occurring in the mind, and the mind becomes uplifted and a bit more radiant. This is possible. This can happen as you're gaining the wisdom that you need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. The mind can experience these things, but you can look at it yourself and just kind of be more introspective and determine for yourself whether or not there's an attachment there or not.
Would it be beneficial to reread the chapter alone maybe and see what arises in the mind
Yeah, if you reread it over multiple days, maybe wait 2 or 3 days and then reread it again and see if it still is experiencing the same thing. You might not, if it was a shift or it was kind of a realization, you might not notice that uplifting of the mind because that shift has already occurred. But if there's a craving, desire, attachment there, as you're extinguishing that, you also won't notice that excitement or that conditioned happiness. So either way, no matter what it was, rereading it will definitely help.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in our next class is we're going to be moving into Volume 6, which is the Natural Law of Dhamma. We're going to be studying chapters 1 through 10, and we're going to be in this book now for a few weeks as we're exploring the chapters related to the Natural Law of Dhamma. As you guys probably know, everything and anything that the Buddha taught in one way or another comes back to the natural law of Dhamma, but this particular book really hones in on the natural law of Dhamma really closely. So I encourage you to read this and pay attention to it, because when we talk about awakening to enlightenment and cultivation of wisdom, this is the natural law that you're cultivating wisdom about. So you're going to need to really know this inside and out, backwards and forward. So pay attention to this particular book, because this is going to be really targeted teachings around the natural law of Dhamma. And so we're going to be in that for several weeks. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be studying the 5 precepts, which is the natural law of Dhamma as well, helping you to understand the moral conduct behind the natural law of Dhamma, or at least a certain portion of it. So you guys are always welcome to attend that or listen to the recording if you like. On Monday, I'm going to be starting a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course, Monday through Friday. That's going to be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thai time here in Chiang Mai. So you guys are always welcome to attend that either in person or online as well. So thank you all for joining. And as you would like to learn more, you're always welcome to continue to learn. Now that you guys have learned this Volume 5, I suggest you read it more than one time, because you're really going to need these teachings. And then also the retreat that's coming up in January, which is only about another 2 weeks from now that it's going to be starting. That is going to take this particular book of Volume 5 and it's putting it into a retreat format where it's giving you everything you need in individual talks. So here you've learned it as a study group, but it's going to be in a retreat format coming up in January. So if you'd like to take that either here in Chiang Mai or you would like to learn online as I teach that, because it's live streamed and recorded, that's another way for you to really get going into this first stage of enlightenment, is to learn the same content but learn it in a retreat format, both rereading the book and learning it in a retreat format as well. So thank you all for reading. Thank you for your questions, and have a lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.